Take you, Carla, to be my lawfully wedded wife, and I promise in covenant before God and all these people to be your loving and faithful husband. I promise to serve you with tenderness and respect and to encourage you to develop the gifts that God has given you to have and to hold from this day forward, in sickness and in health, for better or for worse, in richer and in poorer, to love and to cherish until death do us part. I got to say those words over 25 years ago. And I said them much better today than I did then. Yeah, it was kind of it wasn't a train wreck, but it didn't go smoothly. It was 25 years ago. Those were they call them vows, but they were my promises. I promised that day. I stated them loudly for a big auditorium for people to hear. I did them willingly, and there is some people that believe otherwise, but I always willingly said them. I made those promises. I willingly chose Carla to be my bride, and I willingly made those promises forever. Yet I was like every other newlywed at the time. Because if you have gone through this, if you've stood in front of people, these are for students, just like put this in your back of your memory. If you stand here before God and all His people in an auditorium, and you say those words, you are still just so naive on how much commitment you are making. You are making promises to somebody else, but you don't know the details or the hardship and how difficult it will be to keep those promises that you make. Oh, they're great words. To have and to hold. From this day forward. They're great words, and you mean them. You really do. I'll talk for myself. I meant them. I really did. Every word. But I didn't understand how hard they would be. Some people go the other route. There was this guy named Glenn Wolfe. He has the distinction of being married 31 times. Guinness Book of Records. I don't know if you want that record. 31 times to 29 different women. I guess I think you're better now, so you get married again. I don't know, 31 times. His last time getting married was to this woman who had been married 23 times. The thing that really struck me about Glenn here is that it wasn't until death do us part. It was until maybe I get bored, or maybe until you burn the French toast. There's a limitation. We make these promises and then, maybe I'll come through on them. And I'm so glad our God doesn't look at it the same way. Today we talk about our faithful God. Chose His family. Said, these are my people. And made promises. That's what we're going to talk about. He doesn't think like us. Our short term till death do us part. Really? Let's see, last time we were here, we didn't meet last week for the weather, but last time we were here, we talked about who our God is. And we're starting through this series of the story, the big story. And we talked about Genesis all the way back then, and God says, this is who I am. I am omnipotent as in I am all-powerful. There is nothing too tough for me to do. I am omniscient, that I know what's going on. I know how far you have separated yourself from me. I am omnipresent, as in I'm not bound by time or space or matter. I'm not bound by those things. I can do whatever. And I am an all-loving God who loves you to the bottom of your heart and soul. I love you. This is the God that He revealed Himself. This is who He is. And today we talk about how He said, I'm going to build my family. Will you be a part of that family? So that's what we're talking about. Our God who is faithful to His promises. And He did that through a guy named Abraham. Let me read a little bit about this guy named Abraham. Or back then he was called Abram, the short name. Let me read a little bit. I'm going to read from Genesis chapter 13. No, sorry, it's not 13. It's 12. So I have it right up there. I have it wrong in here. Let me read the words. The Lord had said to Abraham, leave your native country and your relatives and your father's family, and go to the land that I will show you. I will make you into a great nation. I will bless you and make you famous, and you will be a blessing to others. I will bless those who bless you and curse those who treat you with contempt. All the families on earth will be blessed through you. So Abraham departed as the Lord had instructed, and Lot went with him. Abraham was 75 years old when he left Haran. He took his wife Sarah, his nephew Lot, and all his wealth, his livestock, and all the people he had taken into his household at Haran, and headed for the land of Canaan. And we need to get a little bit of background on this. Abram's family was from a place called Ur. Ur. It was a big city in the Sumerian Empire. It was located in modern-day Iraq. And his historians record how the city of Ur was very prosperous. It was like the epicenter for the moon god worship. That was Ur. It was big. It was known for this. And at 75 years old, Abram is doing pretty well in life. 75 years old. He's got lots of servants. He's got livestock, which was a huge wealth. And he's pretty prosperous. He's well known. And then God spoke to him. We'd understand it as God called him. He called him. And just the side note, you're asking, well, how does God call a person? How do you hear God? Well, I'll just go this route with it. It's just a short little bit so that we don't run too far over that. God calls a person. He impresses upon their very being. It is so clear in your head. There's not a way that you can say, well, this is exactly these words, these spoken words. But God, it's like pressing your hand into clay, and you can mold that. And then when you take your hand away, there's an impression in that. That God speaks to a person, and He molds that, and it's like putting your finger in that clay, and left is God's fingerprint there. That you know deep in your soul that God has spoken words to you. That you know so deep, like in your knower, as in I know there's no mistaking here. That's as clearly as I can get it for this moment. Now we can talk about this more. But I wanted to talk about God's faithfulness when He calls a person. Because He calls Abraham and says, this is what I want you to do. I want you to leave everything. I just want you to leave everything. Because when He calls us the same. But to Abraham, He goes, I want you to leave your family. I want you to leave your country. I want you to leave this religion, the moon goddess that you worship. I want you to leave all that behind. I got a place for you. I'm going to be your God. And I want you to start. And I'm going to lead you to a land. And that'll be your land. And I will be your God. And you will worship me. And you will be the start of my family. My people. That's pretty good, isn't it? God says, this is what I have for you. This is the start of something big. And you're going to be a part of this. And there's just so much risk for Abram. They're like, oh, do I leave? Do I not? But it was so impactful. He says, I got to do this. This is where I'm going. And there's 4 sentences that God makes to Abraham, and this is my big plan. I'm going to make you into a great nation. I will make your name famous that people will know you. I'm going to bless you. And I'm going to bless the world through you. Just 4 little things there. Boom! This is God's plan. To show people who He is. This is my family, and this is who I am. I'm going to reveal to you. I'm going to make you part of my big family. And God specifically chose Abram for this. Has God spoken to you and called you to be part of His family? Do you think of this, or just like, oh, I just always come to church. That's who I am. I love coming here. This guy stands up here, he talks loudly, we get good worship. Or has God called you and said, you're part of my family. And when you come here, you're part of my family. That's the reason you're coming here. See, in Ephesians, the first chapter, Paul says, God decided in advance to adopt us into His family. His family. I mean, you look at the people next to you, they're part of your family. Well, some of them are literally part of your family, but even more so, they're part of your family. Like, you look next to them and you say, hey, bro. Or they don't say that anymore. It's bro. It's bro now, right? They're part of a family. And you're saying, wow, I don't like them as part of my family. God has called you to be part of His family, bringing us into His family through Jesus. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but God calls each of us to leave everything to be part of His family. And right now you're thinking like Abraham, saying, do I leave all this? This is my family. This is all, people know me here. These are the gods that I worship. Everything's comfortable here because I know this. Do I leave that? Because God's got a better plan for me? That's the situation. When God calls you to be part of His family, He says, no, this is so pale compared to the vibrant life I have for you as part of my family. Will you be a part of my family? The promises that I'm making to you, will you be a part of that? And our God is faithful to His part. It says, I'm going to do this for you. And if we know ourselves, we know that we're not. That we don't follow up to our side of it. Let me tell you this. I am so glad we have a faithful Heavenly Father. Because you can tell a lot about a person, how they treat their promises. Then when God makes a promise to Abram, He says, I'm going to bless you. I'm going to bless those around you. I'm going to make you famous. And oh man, I got a land for you. He says, I'm going to do this. And how does God treat His promises? He follows through. But for us, I meet with a guy named Pastor Aiken every once in a while. I've kind of adopted him as he's an older retired pastor. He's kind of fun. And we get just to talk about pastor stuff. Most of the time we talk about me and like, man, wow. And it was just a couple of weeks ago, I was talking, and just to be as honest as possible, I said, I hate being so inconsistent in life. And maybe you know the same. Inconsistent in the way, like, sometimes I feel like I'm nailing it. Like, God is in me, we're like on the same page all the time. I'm nailing it. And then other times it's like, oh man, how did I even it's Monday and I've already forgot about you. God, how can I do this? And we talk about this, but don't think that I'm the only person here that says, well, I wish I were more consistent. I wish I were more faithful in the promises that I made. Because if you're here, most likely you're saying, man, I made that commitment to my God. That He's my God. I know Him through Jesus. And I'm following Him. And then there's this thing called like Monday, and I'm off the rails again. You know, some days I feel like Abram, and I'm saying, I'll leave all this for you, God. I'm heading out with you. Sometimes I feel like I'm Daniel. I'll face the lions. Sometimes I feel like David, and I am full of passion. And then there's times that I don't. And I say, what did I promise to my God? God, I promise to be faithful to you from this day forward in sickness and in health, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, in love to cherish, till death do us part. And God, I am so sorry that I don't do that. I'm so inconsistent. This is so much harder than I thought it would be when I made that commitment to live consistently and honestly, genuinely, and faithfully to my God. I meant those promises when I did. It was my freshman year of college. I meant those promises there. I said them. And I'm just so inconsistent. See, Abram didn't live up to his promises either. You know, if we're going to hear one thing today, hear this. That we are consistently inconsistent with the promises we make to God. Now, we hear that one, right? We know that one deep in. And hear this, that God is faithful to His promises. When He said that I will bless you and bless you, other people through you. I'm still going to do that. I will never run away from you. Even though you're inconsistent and stubborn and mule-headed and broken and corrupted deep down, I still love you. Even when you say, God, I got it from here. You can just go to the side. I got it. He's still there. Because God always keeps His promises. Our God always keeps His promises. It started way back in the Garden of Eden. He said, I love you guys. And He made this promise to them, hey, I'm going to make a way to make things right. God made promises to people. We call them covenants in the Bible. That God makes covenants. He made one to Noah. I'm not going to flood the earth ever again to destroy all this. I'm not going to do that again. He made promises to Moses as well. And this is how it comes all the way down. Because the covenant of all covenants it's called the New Covenant. It's out of Jeremiah. Our God summed all His promises into one promise to all His people. From time to start until time ends, He made this promise to all people. He said this, but this is the new covenant I will make with the people of Israel after those days. I will put my instructions deep into them, and I will write them on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they will be my people. This is my promise for all people. And we understand that. God doesn't kick us out of His family. How many people are really excited that God doesn't kick us out of His family just because we're knuckleheads? I'll just say, just for me, I am so glad. That God just does, He says, all right, I understand you, Matt. I understand you. I know you've messed up. It's like so many times, and I still love you. I am still going to be faithful to my promise that you are a child in my family. Every time that I've prioritized someone else or something above God, He says, I still love you. You're still in my family. Every time I chose to do what felt good, as opposed to what God has called me to do, He says, I still love you. You're still part of my family. Every time we've followed the crowd instead of what God has called us to do, He says, I still love you. You're still part of my family. God doesn't abandon you. He still says, you are my child. I will be your God. And He sent Jesus as the sacrifice to make that happen. See, we're going to celebrate communion here this morning. That's the story that we celebrate every time we do communion. You know, that's how God has remained faithful to His promises. See, He promised long ago, I will bless you. I will be your God. You will be my people. I'm going to bless other people through you, and people will see the good news through you. And God promised that I'm going to make a way that you can become right with me. And He sent Jesus. And Jesus was born. We celebrated Christmas how long ago? It was God's promise to us that He says, I'm going to send the Messiah, the Savior of the world, for you. And He came and He lived amongst us. He suffered and He died on a Roman cross so that we did not have to be separated from Him any longer. So whenever we do communion, we celebrate our God's faithfulness to His people. This is what it is. He chose you. He adopted you. And He sent Jesus for you. So we're going to just lead right out of this into communion, where we celebrate our faithful God who has chosen His family. And I want to just give a couple notes here a second before we go on. If you are a guest and you celebrate communion where you worship, you are free to celebrate here. We welcome you with open arms. And also what we're going to do, the way we're going to do it, we do it in different ways each time. We're going to pass the bread and the cups in between, and we'll just stay where you are. And we'll ask you to just hold on to them. And we'll take them all together. There's tables out there. If you need to put them on the table, that's great. But we ask you to hold on to them, and we'll take them all together. But we're going to celebrate the faithfulness of our God, who said, I will be their God, and they will be my people. So I'm going to ask the elders and the others that are helpers to come on up at this time. I love reading Psalm 32 at this time, because it talks about our faithful God and also what He has done for us. Hear the words. Psalm 32, it's this: oh, what joy for those whose disobedience is forgiven, whose sin is put out of sight. Yes, what joy for those whose record the Lord has cleared of guilt, whose lives are lived in complete honesty. When I refused to confess my sin, my body wasted away, and I groaned all day long. Day and night your hand of discipline was heavy on me. My strength evaporated like water in the summer heat. And then there's a small little word there. When I grew up, it was called Selah or interlude. There's an interlude there. Hey, remember this. Your day, your strength was just sapped. You were miserable. Just remember that. Pause. Just pause. Don't want to run past that too quickly. And then it goes on to verse 5. It says, Finally, I confessed all my sins to you, and I stopped trying to hide in my guilt. I said to myself, I will confess my rebellion to the Lord. And this is what you did. And you forgave me. All my guilt is gone. Our faithful God comes to us and says, I love you. I've adopted you as part of my family. I will never kick you out just because you mess up. Because I've paid for those sins. I've paid for them already. Would you come back? Come on back. Let's talk. Our last song is one called The Goodness of God. And we talked about a faithful God. We talked about a God who loves us as part of His family. And when we look back at life, we go, oh man, my God was there in every step. Even when I messed up, He was still there and saying, come on back. That's our God. That's our faithful God, our good God who loves us. So I ask you to stand, and if you're able to, and we'll sing our last song, The Goodness of God.